Hey everyone, welcome here to another online video discussing the economics of agriculture during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is an initiative we're pushing through here at K-State through the agmanager.info site, just trying to provide information to agricultural producers, farmers, ranchers, as well as cooperatives on things that might be of interest to them during this uncertain and interesting time. Here we have a discussion on the government stimulus programs for ag producers and co-ops. This is some information that we wanted to get out to you all. My name is Brian Briggeman. I'm a professor and director of the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center. And I'm here joined by Kevin Herbel and Mark Dikeman, who are going to share some of their insights. So first of all, I'll let Kevin introduce himself and talk a bit about KFMA.
Sure, Brian. I'm Kevin Herbel, Executive Director of the Kansas Farm Management Association program and the KMAR 105 Association. The KFMA program has been in place here at Kansas State University, working with farm families with a focus on using records to make good and improved management decisions on the farm. And a part of that includes assisting with record keeping, as well as analysis of the farm, assessing that over time, benchmarking with others, and looking at tax management issues as well. So we seek to assist and help producers in those areas.
Great. Mark?
I'm Mark Dikeman, Associate Director with KFMA. As Kevin mentioned, we spend a lot of time working with producers and helping them collect data and manage data that allows them to make good decisions. And making good long-term decisions involves a good understanding of tax law as well, and tax and the impact of tax management decisions and the financial picture of that farm in the long term.
And that's kind of what brings us all together here with the close work that you all do with farmers, and then the work that I do with cooperatives. We want to talk about quickly some of these government stimulus programs and provide resources to our respective audiences. I should first of all clarify that by no means is this tax advice or legal advice. We're merely just pointing you all in direction of where to get more information, and we would encourage you, before you make decisions or applications, to consult your legal and tax professionals. All right, so with that, let's start off with talking about the agricultural producers. There are two different types of acts that are out there that are relevant: the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, and then the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or the CARES Act. So in these programs, there are opportunities for agricultural producers. So let's start off with them. So of course, we need to figure everything out. We don't have all the details just yet. But at least at a high level, what programs could farmers benefit from? I'll turn it over to Kevin and Mark here.
Brian, one of the things I want to start with saying is both of these, the components of both of these acts are geared towards helping small businesses who have been hurt by this pandemic. Agriculture is in a little bit of a unique situation in that it is an essential industry. So farms and ranches are not necessarily prevented from going out and working, which obviously crops and livestock need to maintain those. But because of that, they may not, these operations may not have been impacted as much as, say, a downtown restaurant or cafe that is closed because of the pandemic and because of the directives from the state level. So the provisions of these acts are really meant to help support those types of businesses in addition to agriculture. So we can apply some of these provisions to agriculture, but in some cases, it's more favorable towards a Main Street business rather than farm or ranch. Um, so let's look at the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. A couple different components of that. The biggest tax related component is a mandatory 2 weeks of paid sick leave and mandatory paid childcare leave for those who are impacted by coronavirus. For the sick leave, that is 2 weeks of paid vacation or paid sick leave available for someone who's been impacted in several different ways. And the most obvious would be someone who has been infected, or someone who has been quarantined for whatever reason. Some mandatory sick leave is required for employers with less than 500 employees. Mandatory sick leave is required to be paid. And someone in that to an employee in that situation. Connected to that is the mandatory paid child care leave. So if an employer has an employee who's has children, their school has been closed, they don't have other options for daycare, there is a total of 12 weeks of paid child care leave that is mandatory now, or to help that employee who may not be able to take care of that child without school open. So there's some very specific parts to that are going to like you mentioned earlier, an employer who is in this situation, who has an employee who's been quarantined or has kids at home because school is closed, they really need to reach out to their tax preparer, their tax professional, and find out some of the details with this. Now, I've mentioned that the paid leave is mandatory. The employer is required to pay that, but the employer once they pay that, is eligible for a credit for the amounts paid. So the government is not requiring to pay without some compensation or some benefit on the backside of that. So again, consult a tax professional, make sure you understand what the requirements are and what's needed for your employees.
So what other types of producers, farmers should be thinking about these different programs?
So under Families First, the mandatory leave that I talked about, that's going to apply to just about every farm or ranch who has employees on payroll. There is an exemption possible. You can apply for an exemption in certain circumstances. The next set of legislation that we need to talk about, or the next act that we need to talk about, you mentioned the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES Act. This is much more impactful on more tax provisions here than Families First Act. People have probably heard about the recovery rebate payment that should be sent here. This is part of the CARES Act. It's essentially $1,200 per person until your income, your adjusted gross income, it gets to a certain point, and then that payment backs off. In addition to the $1,200 per person, there's another $500 payment for dependents under the age of 17. So depending on income, that payment should be, we haven't heard a specific timeline, but that payment should be rolling out here sometime soon. If you've filed a tax return for 2019 already, they will use information from that return to calculate the payment. If you've not filed your 2019 tax return, it will use the 2018 return to calculate the payment. And in either case, this payment is an advance on a credit that will show up on your 2020 tax return. So there's opportunity to, additional child is born after the credit or after the payment is made, then that would be caught up on when the 2020 return is filed.
And certainly something, Mark, to point out to everybody, this is something that's available to not just businesses, but this is all individuals. And reason, I think, from a number of fronts to be careful if someone calls or says they want to speak to you about this, just to be exercising care. It'll the official name, I think, is actually the economic impact payment is what they're saying these will be called now. And so to just exercise care if someone calls and says they need your information so you can receive that payment, you don't need to be giving them information. This everything that's needed for this to occur is going to be in the system, and just exercise care as those things come along.
Yes, that's this payment will be a target for people who like to defraud. So as Kevin said, be very careful if someone calls or contacts you regarding this payment.
That's good to know. What about on the Paycheck Protection program? Have you guys looked into that at all for producers? I know that has an employee and paying wages and salaries component.
Yeah.
What about on that?
So yes, Brian, the Paycheck Protection program loan was authorized through the CARES Act. It will be administered through the Small Business Administration, and loan applications would go through an authorized SBA lender. Most you can check with your local lender and see if they're authorized to administer that or to accept applications. Without going into great detail, the loan amount is equal to 2.5 times a monthly average payroll, and if the loan proceeds are used for certain types of expenses, including payroll, mortgage interest, utilities, and rent, then a portion of that loan or all of that loan could potentially be forgiven. The amount that's not forgiven is payable over 2 years at 1% interest. So even if it's not forgiven, fairly favorable loan terms in that case. This program is I think intended to help with all small businesses, especially those that have been closed because of the pandemic. But agricultural producers do qualify for this loan. Loan applications actually begin today, 3rd of April. The final, some of the details were just released yesterday, so there's still some areas of this program that we don't fully understand. Over the next days, we will hopefully have more details and a better understanding of what goes into the loan.
Well, and several other things there, Mark. You certainly mentioned the idea of a SBA approved lender, and that actually has historically been a fairly small group of lenders, but with this new legislation, that's being opened up for other lenders to apply, be approved, and given permission to be ones that are making these loans. And there are a number of those, both local lenders, the Farm Credit System, a lot of different areas that will be opened up to be approved lenders in the very near future. They're having to apply and receive that approval, but there will be an expanded group of lenders available for this, and certainly the opportunity to talk with the lender you've worked with, someone you've worked with historically where you have a relationship with, if they're an approved lender for this, would be your best source of place to go in looking to make application.
I know, so the CoBank, part of the Farm Credit System that primarily lends to cooperatives, they have applied for that status and are still waiting to hear. So yes, you're right that there are applications going in for agriculture, banks and lenders that are very familiar with ag. So I think, Kevin, like what you said, going to a local lender who is SBA approved is important. But people are trying. The agricultural lending community is out there trying to receive that status. What about on the Paycheck? I think that's the one, the PPP program. As far as the type of farmer and like the wages that they can claim if they're going to try to recoup that. Is it 1099s? I mean, do you have any idea about that, Kevin and Mark?
That's one of the areas, Brian, we're still there's still some question with regard to that. So that's one area we hope that there's some more clarity in the coming days.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the provisions in the Families First Act seems fairly clear. The CARES Act, we're still trying to figure out a few items yet.
That's correct. Yes.
Well, and certainly here with kind of working through these regulations and what they look like, the Small Business Administration is tasked with that, and the legislation actually gives them up to 30 days to complete that. I think the goal is to accomplish it as quickly as possible, but there will be continual further understanding as clarification is given relative to things here.
Yep.
So are there any other programs that producers need to be aware of?
Yes, there's several other things contained in CARES that can potentially impact producers and individuals. Some changes to required minimum distributions for 2020. The requirement to take those has been removed. So if you've not yet taken your RMD from an IRA for the year, you may be able to not take that, to eliminate the need to take that in 2020. If you've already taken it, there may be some possibilities in putting that back into your account. So check with your IRA advisor on some of the specifics with that. For someone who's hit very hard financially, there is a provision that allows withdrawing up to $100,000 of money from an IRA, and of course the gain on that is taxable, but the early withdrawal penalty has been removed for that purpose for 2020. A couple other things. One, credit for employers that's available in CARES Act called the Employee Retention Credit. This is designed again for those businesses that have been hurt, have been shuttered because of the pandemic. If they continue to pay employees, there's a credit available to them. There's some requirements for that business that business needs to meet that might be difficult for ag producers to meet. So probably not applicable to farm and ranch employers.
But certainly could be potentially for agricultural cooperatives.
Yes. In that case, it could be.
And for other small agribusiness,
right.
Other independent retailers that would be out there should consider that as well too.
Yep, that's right. It's like I said, this is going to apply mostly to a retail store, a restaurant, something like that.
Sure.
Well, one thing I would like to do, Brian and Mark, maybe back up a little bit on the retirement plan. If we're to take that withdrawal up to that 100,000 that we didn't mention, there is the opportunity to return that back to the retirement account over the next 3 years. And so an opportunity with that, if there is a need for some cash in the near term, the opportunity to withdraw those dollars, but then to recontribute those in the future over the next several years without being able to have the tax implications, putting them back in and allow it to continue to be tax deferred.
Good. Well, I know that we want to provide resources and identify some of the programs that are out there. I think we've hit on a lot of the major ones. And of course, as we get more information, we'll roll it out through agmanager.info. But for producers, here are two particular websites to go follow: Roger McCohen and then the Iowa State University Center for Ag Law and Taxation. They have regular updates that they would put there with regards for producers. Just real quick on other programs for ag co-ops, we did talk a bit about the Paycheck Protection program on ag producers, and also certainly for cooperatives. If you wanted some more information, there is a fact sheet that you can go to through the U.S. Treasury Department to get some more information on it. Also, too, has the link for that application. But again, like Kevin and Mark were saying, those SBA-approved lenders, those are the ones that you need to work through for that particular loan program. Also, too, through SBA, there's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. For more information on that, you can go there. I personally have not heard as many cooperatives that are looking into using that disaster loan program. Again, I think as Mark has indicated, a lot of these programs and initiatives are aimed to that business retail store that is significantly hurt, as many of us are at stay-at-home orders. So I think that's primarily there, but I do know cooperatives are looking at that PPP program. For additional resources, as this whole thing is fluid and develops, for co-ops, I'd strongly encourage you to follow the National Council of Farmer Cooperatives. They have a good website and information that comes out through that. So, Mark, Kevin, is there any other parting thoughts that you all might have?
I'd just say that we're still learning and still trying to understand something that's moving fairly fast. So,
well, and certainly to be careful what you do use for an information source. Go to trusted places to get the information that you're going to utilize as you make decisions. And as you've heard a number of different times, certainly through this and things we're doing on Ag Manager, the importance of not giving up on continuing to manage well. Do things that are important to make good and profitable management decisions for your farm operation.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for your time, and appreciate you tuning in at home or wherever you may be watching this video. Again, go to more information. Follow us on agmanager.info as we roll out the timely information for you all to help make the best decisions possible for your farm, ranch, agribusiness, or cooperative. So with that, take care. Thank you very much.